So what I've been doing is I have about 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes at the beginning of an episode where I talk about a bit of lore that's relevant to that point in the series, but isn't really relevant to a particular scene in the episode, if that makes sense. So, like in the first episode, I talked about the the background of the series, like why it's so big, etc. I talked a bit about the death of the author. Second episode, I talked about unreliable narrators, how characters see themselves. So I got to keep doing that as we go along, but this topic is so big and so important, it deserves its own video. Now, I know I did a video on this a while ago, but I felt I could do it better, and now that I'm actually reading a lot more lore and stuff, I think I can kind of chisel this out a bit. So there's going to be a lot of grain of salts, a lot of qualifiers, a lot of things like that as we're going through this. Something you have to understand, at least with stuff like this, stuff like Star Wars, stuff like Star Trek, is the series' internal canon just doesn't hold up. The series contradicts itself a lot. Various interviews contradict the show. Even if they go back and they retcon things and they go, oh no, we intended that the whole time, it's very clearly that they didn't, and it's just they're trying to save themselves. Or they're introducing something after the fact that really isn't the case. So what tends to happen is, particularly with the Game of Thrones TV show and the Star Wars movies, is they try to take very obvious errors or bad decisions on the part of the people making it and trying to come up with in-universe explanations to explain it. And it's kind of a dubious prospect. So when I try to do this, like what I do with Dark Souls, I'm just going to ignore a bunch of the contradictions and I'm just going to try to come up with what I think is the best story, given what we have that's the most internally and thematically consistent. Because a bunch of stuff Ono keeps just shooting his mouth off in interviews and adding things in. So before we get into this, there's going to be spoilers. There's going to be quite a few spoilers. Not really regarding the characters, more regarding some of the background lore. So other than episode 24, I'm not really going to talk too much about spoilers. I might get into Rey. I'm going to try not to talk about Rey, just because that would be a spoiler. But yeah, a lot of it's just lore, which is, I guess, kind of a mystery that evolves. So I'll give you a second. If you don't want to be spoiled, you'll want to watch through the videos and then watch this maybe later on when some of the stuff is revealed. You can leave now. Okay, now that it's just us, I want to start out by saying that the great ancestral race is bullshit. I'm never accepting it. It doesn't matter how many times Ono says, it doesn't matter how many spin-offs or rebuilds or whatever says the great ancestral race exists. I refuse to accept it. To quote Tony Teflon, I have to give a reason. Why can't this be the case? It can't be true because it's stupid. So for those of you who don't know, the great ancestral race was like some post hoc retcon they introduced that basically was like, oh, the angels are actually aliens, and so are humans, and Lilith is an alien, and so is Adam. But there was only supposed to be one of them that landed on the planet, but they both landed on the planet, and Adam went to sleep, and Lilith's children covered the planet, because there's this group of people called the Great Ancestral Race, whose home planet was in trouble, and they seeded life throughout the galaxy. And it's stupid. Aliens to me is like the laziest thing you can do. It's like, I can't come up with something creative, I can't come up with something interesting, so I'm just going to have frickin' aliens in. Now, it made sense in Nadia, and I'll defend it in Nadia, but it was very clear that's where they were heading from the beginning. Whereas in Evangelion, there was a very clear kind of religious connotation, or if you want to look at the series in a bit more abstract existentialist way, the angels aren't really are kind of metaphorical for what the characters are undergoing, and there didn't need to be an explanation. I'm okay with no explanation and stuff like this. You could just say you could just not provide an answer and just say it's a mystery. That's okay, because you have these Cthulhu abominations. So how I kind of felt in the series was it was kind of a mixture of religious and just people not knowing type of thing, which I was fine with. It's a mystery. I'm good with that. But to just bring in aliens for no reason, and it just cheapens it. It removes a lot of the kind of the grand meaning that was there. But that's enough ranting about that. I don't accept it. I don't care what Ono says. It's stupid. So, what do I think the angels are? What do I think is kind of the plot of the series? What is the lore behind the scenes? Once again, this is me taking various parts of canon, other material, background research I've done, and just my own opinion. So one of the core themes of the series is the Tree of Knowledge versus the Tree of Life. Now, for those of you who haven't read the Bible or haven't read it in a while, in the beginning, God set Adam and Eve in Eden, and there were two trees. One held the Tree of Life, which if you ate from it, you would be completely immortal. I'm not sure if you would be eternally young. I'm not sure if you would regenerate wounds, but it would make you immortal. And the other tree was the Tree of Knowledge, the Tree of Knowledge of Good and Evil. I'm not sure exactly what the theology around it is. I kind of feel personally like it gave humanity a rational soul, but I'm sure people will counter me on that. So kind of the idea in the Bible was humanity ate from the Tree of Knowledge, but not from the Tree of Life. So humans were condemned to grow old and die, but by eating from the Tree of Knowledge, we were able to, as the show portrays, we gained free will, we gained intentionality, we gained motivations, we gained science and law and civilization and all these other things. And we were able to overcome a lot of the limitations of not eating from the Tree of Life and becoming all powerful and becoming strong. And God very specifically casts man out of Eden in part because he's afraid that they'll eat of both trees, and then they'll become like gods themselves. Now, obviously, man can't overthrow God, but it's kind of a nice poetic thing to think about it that way. So humanity was cast out of Eden because they didn't know the riddle of steel. No, I'm just joking. But yeah, so humanity left. So the contrast to humans, at least in Evangelion lore, is the angels. The angels have eaten of the fruit of life, but not the fruit. The angels ate from the fruit of life, but not the fruit of knowledge. So we got the fruit of life there. Basically, the fruit of life is an angel's core, which is, the scientific name is an S2 organ. I view the S2 organ as basically being an organic fusion reactor that doesn't require fuel. Because angels have the S2 organ, they're biologically immortal. They can't die so long as it remains intact. Even if the rest of their body is destroyed, they will gradually regenerate so long as the S2 organ is functioning. The issue, though, is that because they have that, they're immensely powerful, but they lack free will, they lack intentionality, they lack the ability to reason. If you look at it, most of the angels behave in an extremely brutish fashion. A lot of them just kind of walk along until they come in contact with a wall or something attacks them. But otherwise, they're often exceedingly passive. And I think to a certain extent, when we're talking about angel motivations, when we're talking about their behavior, and this is, I mentioned this when I was talking about the AT field, they are something that's Asuka, and it just winds up destroying her brain. They're fundamentally different. So, we know the angels have eaten from the Tree of Life, and humans have eaten from the Tree of Knowledge. So therefore, it's humanity uses machines. There's an episode which is based off of the Andromeda strain, which I rather liked. I think a lot of people don't like it, but I liked it, where they defeat one of the angels by hacking it. And it was the only time they defeated an angel without using the Evas. And they say, well, it makes sense because the Tree of Knowledge is what we ate from. So the Evangelions themselves are inherently stronger than angels, despite lacking an S2 organ, because they're built from the angels, but they're built by humans. So while they don't possess the fruit of life per se, they're built using characteristics of both. They do possess the fullness of the fruit of knowledge because they're built by humans and piloted by humans, but they also have characteristics from the other ones. So if you notice, whenever Evas actually function, they normally beat the crap out of angels. The angels are fundamentally weaker, particularly in relation to Unit 1. So, that being said, what the heck are the angels anyways? So there's the apocryphal Book of Enoch, which is very popular among Gnostic circles, among people who like to talk about the books that were left out of the Bible. It was one of the books that, well, not widely accepted. There were church fathers who did think of it as canon, and it is, I think, considered in Orthodox and Catholicism as having some value theologically and morally, but isn't canon per se, if that makes any sense. Kind of like the Shepherd of Hermes or Clement or some of the other stuff, which it was a little debated, but it was never universally accepted. I do believe the Ethiopian Orthodox Church does accept it as canon. But the Book of Enoch is about the Watchers. The Watchers are referenced in Genesis, and probably one of the most bizarre, ambiguous lines of the Bible, where it talks about the sons of God falling in love with the the daughters of man, and them interbreeding to create a race of heroes and giants. Which is never really, I think it's maybe mentioned once or twice again, but the Book of Enoch expands on this. You had a group of angels who, I'm not sure if they fell exactly. The Watchers are kind of a strange bunch. I think there's loyalist Watchers, neutral Watchers, and demonic Watchers. And basically they came down from the heavens and they taught man how to use steel. They taught him how to build cities, that kind of thing. They also took human wives and they began to reproduce with the human wives and created basically a race of super beings, beings who had, in essence, eaten from both trees. And God was absolutely horrified by Uriel to go and warn Noah, and he's like, Noah, the world's going to get blown up, you got to go make the ark. But the world's getting overrun by these super beings, and this is not my plan for humanity, angels. And he sealed all the Watchers away until presumably the Last Judgment. So the angels were all sealed, the Watchers were gone, etc. So that's kind of what I think, in my view, because I don't count the alien theory, is the angels are the old gods. And this is what I've always kind of thought. In the past, when humans thought there was these Watchers or the Nephilim or something, that is what it's a reference to. It's some sort of demon, or some of the ancient gods are kind of more neutral figures and aren't necessarily evil. But so my theory is, in Evangelion, God sealed all the angels away at the South Pole and Antarctica, which is the middle of nowhere. I mean, it makes sense. It's ice, the Great Flood, water, them being sealed away till the end of the world. So I think what happened was they were sealed there, and Sele uncovered, which is, in my view, a Gnostic cult, and by using the power of the angels, they would be able to achieve immortality and kind of climb the great tree of being to become one with God or to become gods themselves. So what I think happened is they sponsored the Katsuragi expedition to Antarctica, and they found the angels buried there, and it's the spear that punctured the side of Christ. So because it has Christ's blood on it, and because it could pierce God, it can kill anything in existence in one shot. I think what they did was there's like a case inside of the greater lance that holds the minor lance, and it kind of projects its power to the bigger lance, which I know doesn't necessarily make sense, but that's the only thing I could come up with, that it could be the real Lance of Longitus while also being the giant one. So whether or not they already had that, or they found that the Antarctic, is kind of irrelevant. So they found Adam, and they woke Adam up so that they could take the tree of the fruit of life from him. Because if you can obtain both, then you basically become a god. You become all-powerful, but also able to have intentionality and will. Because that's kind of And I think that's ultimately what Quaru says at the end. Whether I live or die makes no great difference, because the angels don't necessarily have more moral value. Any of the kind of the characteristics we would associate with having value in a being's life, they're incapable of. So they woke Adam up as not the origin of humanity. Once again, I think something important to keep in mind is you can't take what characters say at face value. You just can't. How do they know? How do they know all this mystical stuff? For most of the series, people think Lilith is Adam. So I don't think Adam is the progenitor of the... Adam is the progenitor of the angels. He spawned a race of beings who possess his followers or something. I don't know, and it doesn't really matter. The point is, he is their father. So they tried to wake Adam up, and when it succeeded, he began to go to full power, and that melted Antarctica and caused second impact. My understanding is they had the lance there, and they were able to hit Adam with the lance, and it reduced him to a dormant state. Now, much as they did with Lilith, to prevent Adam from just regrowing and reactivating, they took Adam's soul out and they put it into a human baby, aka Quaru. Now, whether or not Quaru was specifically built, or it was just a normal human baby they put Adam's soul in, I'm not sure. I personally believe that Quaru has an S2 organ somewhere within him. Otherwise, I don't know what would be powering his abilities. But yeah, so they put Adam's soul into Quaru, and they separated his soul and his body to prevent Adam from reawakening and getting his revenge on humanity, or just because he's so powerful that it would destroy the world. So I think while they were kind of searching around, they found the Geofront, which is where Lilith was imprisoned. Now, the interesting thing about Lilith is Lilith was not originally a demon. Lilith in Jewish mythology was the first wife of Adam, and she was not subservient to Adam. Basically, Adam wanted to be on top during sex, and so did Lilith, and they fought incessantly, and Lilith eventually went off on her own and became the lover of Satan and gave birth to demons. So I kind of view her as a human who gave up her humanity to become a demon and thus kind of ascended. So it's clear in the show that humans are descended from Lilith. Now, does this mean that they're literally descended from Lilith because they're the product of her offspring with the human Adam? Or is it just metaphorical in the sense that she was originally a human who later became a demon? Because Lilith clearly isn't a human anymore by this point in the series. So I think the idea with Lilith is her children have the fruit of knowledge, but not necessarily the fruit of life. Although whether or not Lilith has the fruit of life, I'm not really sure. It's not really adequately established, I think, anywhere. Spoiler alert, I don't know if Rey has an S2 organ. I don't think she does, but... yeah, much as with Adam, they separated Lilith's soul from her body when they woke her up, so that she couldn't awaken and blow the world up. So kind of similar thing. So what do we know about the Watchers? What was it they craved above all else? They craved contact with human women. They craved having children with human women that would possess both fruits and would become like gods themselves. So I think the ultimate motivation of the angels, and I think Anno gave some non-answers, like some were after Adam, some were after Lilith, some were just there because they were there, is that their goal was to reach Lilith, not Adam, and they just misunderstood it. Because they thought that Lilith was Adam for most of the series. So the angels' goal, I think, was to reach Lilith, to breed with her however angels breed. That doesn't necessarily mean sex as we understand it, because most of these beings couldn't have sex because they don't have the parts for it. But to merge with Lilith and to create a new being that possesses both fruits and is therefore godlike. So I think that's the angels' ultimate motivation. And to that end, because they know if that happens and this super being is brought about, then its birth and life will destroy the earth. And that is what Third Impact is and will be. Now, what actually happens with Third Impact is a mess, and we'll deal with that later. This is just my attempt to try to bring some sanity to a show that doesn't make a lot of sense a lot of the time. So that's the purpose of the Angels. The Angels were woken up in Antarctica. Why it took them 14 years to start attacking, I'm not sure. It could just be that it took them a while to wake up. It could be that Sele decided that this whole thing was like a ploy of theirs. So they found the Angels, they woke up Adam. So the Avas are clones of Adam. So they used Adam's DNA to build the Avas, and their plan was to bring the Angels around and then take the rest 2 organs and use them to produce their own S2 organs, and just to get the parts necessary for instrumentality. Sele's plans we'll talk about later, but they have a couple different plans. One, I think, was for them all to merge with an Ava and become immortal that way, and another is to merge all of humanity together. They have a couple different plans which aren't necessarily mutually exclusive, but maybe they waited until all the Avas were ready, and then they woke up the rest of the Angels. But anyways, what is my evidence for saying that someone who possesses both fruits is a god? Well, the strongest being in Evangelion, I think, other than maybe Unit 1, is Quaru. Quaru's AT field is so powerful, he's able to block out light, magnetism, and the strong and weak nuclear forces. Quaru is so powerful that he can shut down the fundamental forces of nature with a thought. He's so powerful he can fly with merely a thought. He has an impenetrable AT field, and he can control Evangelions without even stepping inside of them. He's also able to set his sync ratio to anything. Ultimately, in both the rebuild and the original show, I think it's pretty clear that Quaru decides to let Shinji kill him. He doesn't really put up a fight. I think if he had have tried, he could have crushed Shinji like a grape. Because Quaru, I think, possesses both because he has Adam's soul. He is born of Adam, so he possesses the fruit of life. I mean, he obviously does because he has super abilities. But because he's a human, he also possesses intentionality, most importantly, free will. So he is basically a god. But he realizes ultimately, through his rational soul, that humanity is of more worth than his desire to reproduce with Lilith. And ultimately, it's kind of reminds me a bit of what happens with Javert in Les Mis, where he can't reconcile the fact that Jean Valjean can be a good man and a criminal, and because he can't balance the equation, he chooses death over an inability to accept the destruction of his worldview. So I think that's what happened with Quaru. What that whole, now I understand the Lilith, I don't know. I guess in this theme, my best explanation is he realizes the value of the Lilin, or humanity, because they're descended from Lilith. They have intentionality, like I said, they have personalities, they have an inherent worth, etc. And I think to a certain extent that's why he likes music so much, because the Angels in the series are incapable of producing music, because you need consciousness to do that. And it's doubtful whether or not the Angels are actually sentient. So ultimately, let's just take it. The other instance of this is Unit 1 becomes a god once it absorbs the fruit of knowledge, of life. In fact, it becomes more of a god because Unit 1 is built from Lilith and not Adam. So it's basically become the forbidden merger of Adam and Lilith with a human soul inside of it. So when Shinji pilots Unit 1, he's basically God, because there's nothing in heaven and earth that can really stop him. Now, ultimately, they do stop him, but that's kind of a lot of bullshit. The thing when we're talking about episode 24 is episode 24 is a mess. I love it. It might be my favorite episode, but it is a mess. It is a clusterfuck. Like, nothing about it makes any sense, etc. But I digress. So that was kind of my attempt to explain the Angels, what their motivations are, and what I think the lore in the background is. Whether or not that's the case, I don't know, but I think that's at least a coherent explanation that's internally consistent with the show, with the themes, and doesn't resort to having dumb stuff like aliens involved. So I hope you enjoyed the video. More to come on the series, and I'll talk to you guys later.